This alleged shooter said, in short, immigration can only be detrimental to the future of America. Continued immigration will make one of the biggest issues of our time, automation, so much worse. Some sources say that in under 2 decades, half of American jobs will be lost to it. Of course, some people will be retrained, but most will not. So it makes no sense to keep on letting millions of illegal or legal immigrants flood into the United States, and to keep the tens of millions that are already here. Invaders who also have close to the highest birth rate of all ethnicities in America. In the near future, America will have to initiate a basic universal income to prevent widespread poverty and civil unrest as people lose their jobs. So let's start with that. I don't know what this person is talking about, because when I walk into Target across the street and you just have, self-pay machines, or you now walk into the movies, there's no more tellers, you just pay in a machine. Or you work, even it's starting to happen at drive-thrus.
Everywhere, McDonald's, if you look at McDonald's right now, they don't have a lot of them, but it's always 1 or 2 that's on the side. If you don't want to wait in line, you can just take your order right there.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think these machines are Mexican. No. I don't think these machines are Muslims. Yeah. I don't think these machines are humans. So,
I think he's making 2 different points.
No, he's not. He's talking about automation. Okay. Automation is machines.
Yeah, no.
So, of course,
read it again.
Some sources say that in under 2 decades, half of American jobs will be lost to automation.
Yeah, automation.
Of course, some people will be retrained, but most will not. So it makes no sense to keep on letting millions of illegal or legal immigrants flood into the U.S. And then to keep tens of millions that are already here. Automation has nothing to do with immigration.
No, that's not what he's saying is this. He's saying that there's not going to be any jobs anyway, so why do you keep on letting people in? In a minute, because of automation, there's not going to be any jobs, so why do you continue to let all them in? I think that's what he's saying on there.
Right, but I think you may be right. The way I'm interpreting it is he thinks somehow automation has to do with immigration.
Nah, I don't think.
Okay, well, even to your point, if he's saying automation is taking over anywhere, so we're already going to lose our jobs, you're making it much worse. Yeah, as immigration isn't the thing to attack?
Yeah, the automation, of course.
Because what is threatening people's jobs more, immigrants or robots?
It's automation.
Do you know what the number one? You know what the number one industry in America is? Truck drivers.
Oh, you were telling me about that.
The number one industry in America is truck drivers. I have spoken with experts who say there will be no more human truck drivers probably in 3 to 5 years. That is the threat. And this, frankly, some of you are part of the Andrew Yang gang. I am not. Because I don't believe in a defeatist attitude that, well, there's nothing we could do. Automation is inevitable. We got to just, deal with it, and here's $1,000 a month. I think $1,000 a month would be very helpful to most people. But if there are no jobs, $12,000 extra a year, that you can't live with $12,000 if you can't get a job.
Dog, and automation, think about the idea of automation.
Can I just say something? Automation, they could call it automation. What automation is corporate greed. That is what automation is. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's what I'm saying. You took the words right out of my mouth. Go ahead.
It's not inevitable, okay? So in the 1950s and 60s, for some of you folks who might be older now and grew up, there was a zeitgeist in America. There was a culture. There was a social contract and dynamic that, CEOs kind of made 10, 15% more than their workers. CEOs kind of cared if their workers could live. CEOs kind of cared about the air their workers were breathing, the water their workers were drinking. CEOs might have a problem if their workers had to work another job after working 8 hours. Actually, it was a source of pride for CEOs. A CEO, it was competition among CEOs. How many jobs I've created, not how much I'm doing without having to pay anyone, or how few people I've employed, or how many people I'm cutting, and what my quarterly dividend was, and all this. I think a lot of that changed, frankly, in the 1980s with this greed is good mentality of Wall Street. Yes, it was a movie, but it was an idea.
Yuppies.
Yes, young yuppies. So the point is, today, and this is where I think Andrew Yang gets it worse. No. Automation, yes, some things would be automated, but automation is a choice that companies have because there's no regulation of business in this country. That's why I call it the United Corporations of America, because it's not a country. We are a large-scale corporation governed. We are basically a bunch of workers, 330 million, governed under a giant corporation. You can, and somebody might say, well, this is communist, Jordan, or this is socialist, or this is too big brother. No, you can have laws. You can have basic regulations of how many people a state or a sector, you know, when you read the jobs reports, you have the retail sector, you have the manufacturing sector, you have the real estate sector, whatever it is. You can have regulations and laws.
Yes.
How many people need to be employed? This is what Bernie Sanders and others are talking about with a universal jobs guarantee. So automation is not inevitable. And some of you might say that's naive. It's inevitable if we keep allowing corporations to buy our politicians. I'm not at the Young Turks anymore, but one thing they got right in the beginning was money is the root of all evil. And no story that we cover doesn't have under it, at its root, money and the toxicity of money in politics. So automation is not inevitable. And that's why I don't agree with Andrew Yang. I also don't agree with him for other reasons, because I think he's trying to rob Peter to pay Paul. So he's giving you $1,000 a month, but he also wants to take people off what he calls entitlements, like Social Security, Medicare, these things, and shift everyone over to UBI. But those aren't actual entitlements. We pay into them for all our lives. Yeah. You wanted to say something?
I was just gonna say, not to be confused. Like, money isn't evil, but the root of evil is always money. If you go back, you always see people do messed up stuff because they want to get more money. But I don't think it's, when you say people, I'm surprised that people would think that's like a communistic like approach, like regulations. No, like, we have regulations with everything. It seemed only right to regulate things. I think what happens now in the technology boom, what happens is technology happens and we figure it out 10 years later. Laws come 10 years later and it's like too late. You know what I mean? Like, we have to start making laws, because in 10 years, like, people are going to revolt. No one's going, you're not going to have 50% of the country not having a job and be insecure, don't know how they're going to feed their family, and just lay over. That's not going to happen. So in order for you to prevent some type of revolt, some type of revolution, because it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. I'm telling you. You know what I mean? We had a revolution, a racial revolution in the 60s, but that was only one side. That was black people trying to do it, and you had some of the white South trying to resist. But that was us. When you have an entire country, who they're going after, because once the revolution happened, they're going to realize who's doing it, who's involved, who made this happen. You know what I mean? I don't think it's anything wrong with having type of regulations where we know technology's happening. They can do this because they're greedy. They just want money. So the less people they have to pay, the more money they're going to make. That's all they're worried about, and we know that. So let's put regulations where you have to have this amount. There's nothing wrong with that. That's protecting its people. You know, how do you have a country and you don't protect its people? That's what laws are for. That's why they try to regulate being able to throw waste in the water. You know what I'm saying? Try to regulate fracking. That's why people want to do that. Like, these things are for our benefit. You don't want to have to turn on your water and be able to light it, and you can't drink it, and you got to fill up a bucket every 3 or 4 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing like that's not a communist like thing. That's like a regular.
Oh, of course. I'm referencing what Liz Cheney calls Commie Bernie, because these are all the people that work for the corporation saying this. It's completely reverse psychology, these Republicans, and frankly, there's a lot of Democrats who talk that way too. The point is, I mean, we already went into why he's brainwashed into thinking like Mexicans and brown people and these people are like the source of the issues in America.
That's just that's the cup of tea, right? That's right. Racism. That's America. That's American as apple pie. Racism.
But it is not. Automation is not inevitable, and as Bernie Sanders, part of the reason Bernie Sanders has caught on over the last few years, and not only Bernie Sanders, but people like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Congressman Ro Khanna, many, many other progressives. Not just their policies. They're talking about dignity. They're talking about we need to bring back dignity to America. We need to remove this system that is basically a country based on social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, and we're in an economic Hunger Games. We've been in an economic Hunger Games since the 1980s, really. That is why progressive politics, and you go down the issues. Why do you think Medicare for All is polling in a majority among Republicans? Why do you think free public college is a majority of support among Republicans? And obviously, more support among Democrats and independents. Go down the list. Green New Deal, fight for $15 minimum wage, all these things. They are supported because the people supporting it are struggling themselves. There's different degrees of struggle. There's the person who doesn't know if they're going to be able to keep the roof over their head in the next 30 days when their rent bill comes. And there's people that just have a little bit of debt. But everybody's struggle is different, but the pressures and the anger and the desperation can be very similar. So this is the economic programming. And of course, what Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Ted Cruz, Louis Gohmert, some Democrats, they're so good at doing this, is making you think there's a non-corporate reason. And this alleged shooter, who's a psychopath, is contradicting him all over the place, because on one end, he's right to point out the corporations, but at the other end, he kind of separates the two onto two different islands. You have the corporations, bad, but it's really the Mexicans and the Muslims. You know what? Let's just use journalism as an example, right? So Status Quo started a year ago, right? Jen, who's in the Super Chat, is the co-founder. Ty came on with us pretty much like a month after that. We're actually doing it a radically different way than most people. Most outlets, from the New York Times to the Washington Post to CNN to MSNBC, they work on an advertising model. Meaning, I have to get, if I'm the New York Times or I'm the Washington Post, or I need to get a certain amount of traffic to my website to meet my corporate advertisers' demands, or what I promised my corporate advertisers.
Shareholders.
I used to work at a website that they were literally buying traffic to meet advertising quotas, because you tell your advertiser, we're projecting we're going to meet X for this month, and that's what the advertiser pays you based on. So if you know the media a little bit, a lot of people have been laid off in the media and journalism over the last 2 years because Facebook and Google, two corporations that own our government, Facebook and Google are allowed to do whatever the hell they want, and Facebook and Google have now hijacked about 85 to 90% of the advertising revenue from the actual news outlets creating the journalism. All you got to do is Google Facebook and Google's duopoly on advertising.
Brought to you by Bill Clinton.
Why I bring that up is because it's not just the traditional things like manufacturing that the corporations have hijacked, or retail, or weapons, or name your industry. It's every industry, because corporations are not regulated in this country. Perfect example, the Wall Street crash of 2008. We have governmental regulators that are supposed to regulate industries like Wall Street, like insurance, whatever. The regulators are asleep because the corporations have bought the government, the regulatory battles, and all that. Yeah. So it's not like that. This is partly why I don't want to make this political, that to me, Elizabeth Warren's plans are not enough, because just saying we're going to regulate things more doesn't change the structural rot of the system. You could have plans to regulate things more, but until you get the money out of the politics, the regulations are just going to be, the regulatory bodies will be there, but without power, because the corporations will still buy off the government. Elizabeth Warren cannot change that all on her own. That's why Bernie Sanders says, I cannot change that all on my own as president. That's why we need a revolution, which scares a lot of people, but that's the truth. So,
and the revolution is two different things in two different ways. You can have a political revolution where we get gutted It doesn't have to. It's not always like violence. You know what I mean? But it can end up being that if you don't do what needs to be done before. You know, it's like a powder keg, man. If you don't release that pressure, it's gonna blow.
Right. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statusquo.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statusquo.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.